Hi, good evening. I'm Sharaad Kuttan, and welcome to Consider This. Tonight we have the author of The Billionaire Raj, James Crabtree. He's Associate Professor at the Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy in Singapore, and also Senior Fellow at the Center on Asia and Globalization, author of many other books, including Connected People, Rethinking Broadband Britain. Thank you so much, James, for being with me today. I'd like to begin with the fact that you're located in Singapore, and then when you look up north, as it were, you see Malaysia. And I wonder, the Malaysian story over the last year in particular, does it interest you? What do you see happening that sort of conforms with or goes against your own sense of the world and the way economies work and societies operate?
So I wrote a book about India, which was about the rise of the super rich and crony capitalism, and there's quite a lot of overlap between the Malaysia story and the India story. So in India, in 2014, Prime Minister Narendra Modi was elected after a series of corruption scandals on a promise to clean up the country. In 2018, something very similar happened in Malaysia, where you'd had a roiling corruption scandal in 1MDB, and the old government being thrown out in what I think was a very optimistic, very positive development for the country. And now both of these governments are grappling with how to deliver on the hopes that the people gave to them. You know, are they going to be able to clean up politics and reorganize their respective economies in order to make their countries less corrupt and more prosperous?
You know, what's interesting, because with the Indian story, is that we have it refracted through issues like the Kashmir problem, the Jammu and Kashmir problem of late, but also the rise of Hindu nationalism. But we'll put that aside for a while. I want to ask you specifically about your book and the choice of, as it were, aperture. Why did you choose billionaires as a way, entry point to understanding India? And I did some Googling around for some factoids about billionaires. I don't know, something about 18 new billionaires in 2018, coming up to about 138 billionaires as a whole, but that still pales in comparison to China's 300 or 300 more if you include Hong Kong, and of course the US phenomenal amount of, I think it's the largest number of billionaires in the world. Why billionaires as a way to understand India?
Well, so people are fascinated by the super rich, and I became fascinated by the super rich in India. I lived there for 5 years between 2011 and 2016. I lived in Mumbai, the financial capital where most of the billionaires live, and I just became obsessed with the lives of the Indian super rich and the vast amounts of money that were being created. So the richest man, not just in India, but in Asia, is an Indian tycoon called Mukesh Ambani. He lives in an enormous residential skyscraper, the billion-dollar home.
That's the way to describe it,
yeah,
absolutely.
The famous billion-dollar home in Mumbai. But just in general, India, as Malaysia has been creating a huge amount of wealth at the very pinnacle of its society. This is the region of the crazy rich Asians. And so I was interested in Indian tycoons, but I was also interested in how it was that they made their money, had they done it the right way or the wrong way, and what were the consequences of that for India's economy and also for its society. Was it becoming less or more unequal?
Is there a wrong way to become a billionaire? I know on the list of countries, the top 15 countries of billionaires, there we have Russia. And because Russia, of course, is always said to be made up. I mean, the billionaires there are said to be oligarchs, and they seem to have, somehow made some sort of deal when they were transfers the assets from the state to the private sector, and so on and so forth. Is there a wrong way to become a billionaire? Is it a dog-eat-dog world where some people just take the advantage when they see it and then become rich?
Well, I think you have two different types. You've got, in a sense, what some people call the good billionaires, who are those who, let's take the Indian software entrepreneurs who built great companies, sold products on global markets, made an absolute fortune, and there's nothing particularly wrong with that. But then there were also a large number of billionaires in India, but also here in Southeast Asia, who made their money through their, at least in part, through their connections to the government by getting special favors, special concessions. So I have no particular problem with people making money honestly, but there were plenty of people who were making money because they were getting favors from friends in high places.
Right, this would be rents or rent-seeking activity and so on. So, what for you is the downside? If you put aside the morality of it, of getting favors. Well, what does it do to the economy when you have the rich becoming rich in this particular way?
Well, for a start, it tends to mean that you get corruption scandals like 1MDB in Malaysia, or the huge number of scams, they call them multi-billion-dollar scams, that preceded Narendra Modi's election, the telecom scandal, the coal scandal, the iron ore scandal. But more than that, it tends to lead to misdirected investment. So if you think about India, even up to today, but over the last decade, there have been a lot of money borrowed from banks that was misspent in projects that probably wouldn't have gone ahead if it had better governance. And exactly the same was true here in Malaysia and in Southeast Asia in the run-up to the Asian financial crisis of the mid to late 1990s, where you had a lot of speculative investment going into areas like property and infrastructure that didn't really need to be built, that were being built because of corruption and cronyism. And so it isn't just that you have corruption scandals, it's that you have a lot of productive capital that could be used to build useful things going into things which aren't useful.
Is it a failure of our moral fiber? I mean, these countries that demonstrate precisely the kind of scenarios that you just sort of sketched out for us. Or is it a question of institutional failure? That we don't have the democratic institutions to enforce good governance and so on and so forth?
Well, I suppose it's a bit of both, but I think the second way is much the most useful way of looking about it. This isn't about India or Malaysia having a peculiar problem. In actual fact, this is almost a universal phenomenon. In the book, I talk about America in the late 19th century, the American Gilded Age, the age of the robber baron tycoons and corrupt urban politics, where you had billionaires or millionaires then who were at least as greedy and corrupt as those that have been the worst of India, and politicians of much the same ilk. And almost any country that has gone through this early stage of industrialization, whether it was Britain in the early 19th century, America in the late 19th century, Korea in the 1960s, Southeast Asia, or now India and South Asia today, a lot of them go through this stage. And what you need are good quality public institutions to manage this, and that tends to be the problem, that your governments are not good enough at managing these complicated processes of economic development.
Okay, we'll take a short break. We'll be back with more. Stay tuned to Consider This.